Our name is Ghosts Want You Dead. As one year ends and another begins, we must look back in judgment on what we have wrought. Hello, I'm Matthew. Our dear Rebecca has taken to the bed with a bout of the strep, so she is not in speaking shape at the moment. She will rejoin us possibly later this week for a catch-up episode, or if nothing else, next week. Our apologies for the disruption to our schedule. Anyway, we hope you've had a lovely but spooky holiday season. As we wrap up 2025 and enter 2026, the year in which Dark Shadows celebrates its 60th anniversary, we thought we should review everything that has happened so far. It all began with Victoria Winters. Victoria Winters will be the first to tell you that she is an orphan, abandoned on the steps of the Hammond Foundling Home in New York as an infant in the wintertime, as her name reflects. She will tell you this many, many times. Victoria grew up relatively happy in the Foundling Home, given the circumstances, and after coming of age, stayed on to live and work there as a young adult. When she is around 20 years of age, she receives a mysterious letter from one Mrs. Elizabeth Collins Stoddard, offering her a position as a private governess for her nephew David Collins. Victoria accepts this weird job offer because of the letter's postmark. You see, the Foundling Home has been receiving monthly payments for her upkeep since she was a small child. And this mysterious new job is located 50 miles away from the Bangor, Maine postmark on the envelopes this orphan money arrived in. So this mysterious job offer provides an opportunity for Victoria to investigate her origins. We first meet Victoria on the train from New York to Collinsport, Maine, where she is headed to work for the Collins family at their estate, Collinwood. Collinwood is your classic spooky old house isolated high up on a hill. The role of Collinwood, in exteriors at least, is played by Seaview Terrace. I will quote from Wikipedia. Seaview Terrace, also known as the Carey Mansion, is a privately owned mansion located in Newport, Rhode Island. It was designed in the chateau-esque style based on the French chateau of the 16th century and completed in 1925. It was the last of the great summer cottages constructed, and it is the fifth largest of Newport's mansions, after the Breakers, Ochre Court, Belcourt Castle, and Rough Point. Fictional Collinwood is an estate consisting of the main house, portrayed by Seaview Terrace, and then also on the grounds are a caretaker's cottage and what is ominously referred to as the old house, which was the original family home that has fallen into disuse and is abandoned and spooky. This is where the ghosts hang out. Anyway, back to the train. Victoria Winters is a pretty brunette with a high forehead, high cheekbones, a prominent chin, and big brown hair worn high in the style of the day. Also on this train, bound for Collinsport, is a tall, dark, and handsome man of mystery. Similarly, he is also all forehead, cheekbones, and chin. I would have pegged him for late 40s, early 50s, age-wise. If Rebecca were here, this is where she'd chime in and say, I'd have pegged him. But alas, she's not. But in spirit, she's fond of Burke. Anyhow, Mitchell Ryan, the actor portraying Burke, was only 32 at the time the show began. He is returning to his hometown after a decade-long absence. He is Burke Devlin, Burke Devlin, Burke Devlin. His name is uttered early and often. Much, much more about him later. Burke Devlin, Burke Devlin, Burke Devlin is the first of many to warn Victoria Winters against going to work at Collinwood. However, from the train, he drives her into town to the Collinsport Inn, the local hotel where he will be living while in town, so that she can take a taxi on to Collinwood, the spooky old house where she has accepted a job. Victoria has all of the hallmarks of your average Gothic literature governess. A wide-eyed young orphan going to work in a spooky old manor for an eccentric family with hints of a mystery, shades of Jane Eyre and the turn of the screw. Speaking of that eccentric family, meet the Collinses. Matriarch Elizabeth Collins Stoddard, she who hired Victoria sight unseen, is an elegant and reserved New England waspy sort of middle-aged woman. Canonically, we meet Liz when she is 49, but the actress playing her was 56 at the time. She is beautiful, but her severe expressions make her an intimidating rather than motherly figure for the most part. She's a bit of Miss Havisham meets Mrs. Danvers by way of Louise Fletcher as the scary grandmother in the 1987 film version of Flowers in the Attic. Liz is the lady of the manor and hasn't left the grounds since her husband left her 18 years ago. We don't know quite why just yet, but we're about to find out in the coming weeks. Mr. Stoddard did leave Liz with a daughter, Carolyn, before he mysteriously vanished. Carolyn is essentially the Marilyn Munster of the Collins family. She is the generally perky young blonde girl. She's pretty and boy crazy and not nearly as spooky as the rest of her family, or so she would have you believe. Liz and Carolyn have lived alone in the big spooky house, aside from a spooky caretaker named Matthew, for the last 18 years. The mansion has recently, within the last few weeks of Victoria's arrival, also been invaded by Liz's brother, Roger Collins, and his son, David. David's mother, Laura, has been recently institutionalized. Roger, having squandered his inheritance, has come to mooch off big sister Liz. Both Roger and Liz speak with old-timey mid-Atlantic accents. Roger is a spoiled rich douchebag who turns up his nose at everyone. He is snide and scheming. He's meant to be about 40 years old. He is handsome, also with a prominent forehead and thin lips. Think of a 90s era gay Disney villain like Scar or Jafar by way of a male Cece Babcock from The Nanny. He hates his son David, who is between the ages of 8 and 10. David is a shitty little kid. He's sneaky and mean and morbid and has a habit of eavesdropping and is just generally unpleasant to most everyone. We also mentioned in passing the caretaker, Matthew Morgan. Matthew is a creepy old man who is fiercely loyal to Liz. So now that Victoria has joined, those are the inhabitants of Collinwood for the time being. Also in the town, we'll get acquainted with Sam Evans, the local alcoholic. He's a painter, and according to everyone you ask, used to be a really nice guy that everybody liked until about 10 years ago when he became a miserable drunk. Sam's wife has died, leaving him to raise his young daughter Maggie by himself. Maggie also has fond memories of her father from 10 years ago, but for the last 10 years up into the present, he treats her miserably and is a bad parent. Maggie is similarly aged to Victoria and Carolyn, somewhere between, say, 18 and 25. One really doesn't know. Maggie works as a waitress in the restaurant at the Collinsport Inn. We first meet her in a choppy short wig, which she abandons after a few episodes because her natural hair is too similar in shape to Victoria Winter's. But I suppose they decided that wig is too ugly, let the people be confused. So we generally encounter Maggie at the restaurant, at the inn, or at the small house she shares with her horrible father, Sam. They live in a sort of shabby chic artist's cottage, paintings and canvases strewn everywhere, and handmade knitted blanket tossed over the couch, and shabby but cute. We mostly encounter Sam either at that house or at the local bar, the Blue Whale. The Blue Whale is a small town dive with a jukebox that plays roughly 4 different songs. It's nautical themed, naturally, being in a small fishing village with, nets tacked to the walls and such. This is primarily all of our locations for the first bit of the show. We're either at Collinwood, at the Evans house, or at the inn, either in the restaurant or in Burke Devlin's room. Also in the town of Collinsport are the Collins Canneries. The family business is a fleet of fishing boats that catch sardines, which are then brought back to Collins Canneries and canned. So they are filthy rich on canned sardines. Other local residents include Joe Haskell, who is Carolyn Stoddard's boyfriend or fiance, depending on which day of the week you ask. They have been together a long while, and he regularly asks Carolyn to marry him, but she never accepts. Joe is dreamy. I am very fond of him. Joe also works at the Collins Canneries. I believe he is a fisherman. Also employed by the Collins family at the canneries is Bill Malloy. Bill is a sort of haggard old fisherman type with a gruff personality, but is a nice guy. He's very New Englandy, and Rebecca is also very fond of him. I believe That is most of the players we need to know for this first chunk of episodes. There is also police presence throughout, but it changes. So, what we've covered so far is Victoria's arrival at Collinwood, where she explains to everyone why she's come to the town to learn about her mysterious origins. And it is never outright stated, but heavily implied that Liz Stoddard is probably her mother. The Collins family initially becomes suspicious of Victoria when they learn that Burke Devlin arrived on the same train with her and drove her into town. Burke Devlin has a long sordid history with the Collins family. You see, Burke and Roger used to be best friends many years ago. And about 10 years ago, first, Roger stole Burke's girlfriend, essentially. Laura, who is David's mother and Roger's wife, was with Burke Devlin first and then with Roger. The three of them were all pals, however, and had been out drinking one night 10 years ago. They had gone to the bar in Burke's car. Burke was very drunk and insisted on driving home anyway. On the journey back home, the car struck and killed a pedestrian. At the time, everyone involved, or at least Roger and Laura, said that Burke was driving, and they testified to this at his trial, so he went to jail for manslaughter for 5 years. We have since learned that Burke's version of the story is that yes, he was too drunk to drive, but insisted on it when they left the bar, but that midway through, Roger decided he was too drunk and said, "No, pull over, I'm going to drive," so that they switched places before the pedestrian was killed. And so Burke believes that Roger and Laura lied on the stand and had him falsely convicted and imprisoned. Sam Evans is entangled in this somehow. We don't know if he witnessed the accident. I don't think they've said outright, but essentially, Roger paid off Sam to not come forward and say he knew that Burke didn't do it. They've just talked around it, but we all know that Roger was really driving and should have gone to jail, and Sam was driven to alcoholism and also being just a general jerk and an abusive father because he is sick from his secret about the manslaughter. That has been the main topic of the story so far. Also, during this time, little David Collins, Victoria Winter's only pupil, has revealed himself to be a little creep, and he has tried to kill his father. David likes to read magazines, and in one of his magazines was a detailed diagram of how to assemble and thereby disassemble the brake systems in a car. So David hatches a scheme to tamper with the brakes in his father's car so that he will wreck and die. And he tries to sort of frame Victoria for this and also Burke Devlin, but then changes his mind when he meets Burke Devlin and thinks he's just the coolest guy ever. Now, there is also some ambiguity as to who is actually David's father. Both Roger and Burke say on separate occasions that, well, David could have actually been Burke's son. Anyway, David is preoccupied with murder, murdering people or other people murdering people, and he's big on revenge and threats. He's a little creep. He and Victoria don't get along particularly well. Those are the broad strokes of what has happened so far. A couple of minor details to review. At Collinwood, there is a spooky basement. And in the spooky basement, there is a locked room which only Liz has the key to. Victoria, being there to investigate, is kind of a snoop, and so she really wants to know what's going on down in the basement. But creepy old Matthew and also Liz catch her snooping in the basement, and they're not pleased. One night, Victoria hears a spectral wailing, a sob, a ghostly cry from her room on the second floor. She wanders down to investigate and eventually traces it to the locked room in the basement. When she knocks on the door, the crying stops. Victoria also eventually meets terrible old Sam Evans, the drunk painter, and questions him to see what he might know about her mysterious parentage. And at his house, she finds a portrait of a woman who looks exactly like her. So naturally, she thinks, oh, this must be my mother. But Sam bursts her bubble and reveals that no, this lady moved away from town and died more than 20 years ago, so she couldn't possibly have been your mother. Let's see, what else has happened? Well, we mentioned that Carolyn is boy crazy and strings Joe along but won't marry him. Carolyn is also smitten with Burke Devlin and is in imaginary competition with Victoria for his love. Victoria has hung out with him a couple of times, but everything has been above board, and she just wants to know what he might know about her past. But Carolyn views them as rivals for his affections, and Carolyn is constantly throwing herself at Burke Devlin and embarrassing herself and embarrassing Joe. We've also learned in these first episodes that all men love Liz and are fiercely loyal to her. Except for her brother, I suppose, who mistreats and lies to her often. But David and Bill Malloy and creepy caretaker Matthew Morgan are all devoted to her. We learn that Sam Evans maybe used to have a bit of a crush on her. We learn that the previous business manager for Collins Canneries had been in love with her and quit his job and moved away from town when she refused to marry him. So Liz inspires devotion and affection in most menfolk. Which, I mean, fair enough, she's a hot lady, but also maybe she's a witch. Who knows? So much was made of Roger's car accident. Everyone initially seems to think Burke Devlin did it on account of them being enemies from the whole manslaughtering incident. But when it comes out that David was the real attempted murderer, the family and thereby the police brush the whole thing under the rug. During all of that is when David meets Burke Devlin and wants Burke to be his new dad. They get along well, and Burke buys David a crystal ball as a present, and David just loves it and is always consulting it for answers. Also, David is really in touch with many of the ghosts of Collinwood. So he's a spooky little kid, and everyone just writes that off to an overactive imagination, but we'll find out that David is right more often than not about these matters. So, where we stand now, Bill Malloy, in an effort to get Burke Devlin to leave the Collins family alone and stop seeking revenge, offered to help him prove that 10 years ago he wasn't responsible for the vehicular manslaughter. He's going to prove this by proving that Roger actually did it. Bill calls a meeting in Roger's office at 11 o'clock one night between himself, Burke Devlin, Roger, and Sam. But Bill never shows up to the meeting because Bill is dead. And much is made over who killed Bill. We don't yet know if it was Roger or if it was Sam or was it Burke or maybe even David. Who knows? And maybe no one killed him at all. Maybe he just was drunk because he was drunk that night and fell off a cliff into the ocean. However, the coroner has ruled the death an accident, which Roger Collins is particularly pleased about, but Burke Devlin is not. Who killed Bill? Who is Victoria's mommy? Who is David's daddy? Will Burke Devlin be Carolyn's new daddy? Perhaps we'll find out these answers in the coming weeks. At any rate, we'll be back with a proper recap of the next 5 to 10 episodes, depending on when Rebecca is feeling better, and look forward to telling you all about the goings-on in Collinsport in 2026. Happy New Year! Also follow us on Instagram at Ghosts Want You Dead. Leave us reviews, please, on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you happen to listen to us. Okay, now I'm finished. Happy New Year!